Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG studio Steve Jackson, Senior Vice President of Growth at Binalyze. How you doing, Steve?
I'm very well, very pleased to be here.
It's great to have you here. Fascinating topic, incident response and how you can respond more quickly, especially from the Security Operations Center. We're going to be talking about what automation brings, what collaboration brings. Again, it's a hot topic because the number of incidents doesn't seem to be going down, because the number of attacks doesn't seem to be going down. I don't mean to steal the thunder, because my first question for you is, why is investigation and response and automation becoming such a hot topic?
Well, as you mentioned, it's becoming a hot topic because the volume, the velocity, and the sophistication of attacks is increasing exponentially. Sophistication being the most important of those three. So we now have well-funded, oftentimes nation-state organizations performing these attacks and attempting to breach critical national infrastructure organizations around the world. So the ability to have a sufficiently sophisticated response to that and the ability to investigate those kinds of breaches is becoming more and more important for organizations, especially at the large enterprise side. So that's one of the drivers. We're also seeing a significant amount of data movement and also an expansion of the attack surface area, specifically since COVID times. So now a lot of people working remotely, a lot of people working on multiple devices, personal devices. It's difficult now to put a security fence around the organization. The attack surface area is much larger. So all of these things are contributing to an overall situation where organizations should assume breach. They should assume that they will be breached at some point. And if they take that assume breach mindset, then they have to have sufficient investigation capability to respond to those breaches.
What about detecting the breaches in the first place? Because historically, that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Where are organizations today, and are they able to hand off then to incident response?
Yeah, so most of the organizations that we work with at Binalyze are at the larger end of the enterprise, or there'll be governmental organizations, military organizations. And in those scenarios, what you find is that they are quite mature now in terms of things like CM, SOAR solutions, EDR, XDR, MDR type solutions. So that's providing them excellent detection capability, actually, and a lot of alert level visibility. The problem arises when they try to pivot from detection into investigation. So once you pivot into investigation, you enter a space where it's a lot more fragmented, and that's where it starts to slow down, become quite ineffective and quite difficult to complete an investigation.
And by fragmented, what do you mean by that?
So on average, we did some research with IDC recently, and they found that for an average incident response investigation, organizations are using 11 to 15 different tools and up to 30 plus different tools to perform an incident response investigation.
And by tool, you mean off the shelf, or you mean hand artisanal?
Yes, it will be scripts and toolkits. It will be open source products, some paid products, a real mix of tools to perform the investigation. And obviously that creates a lot of data silos. It creates a lot of complexity into the investigation process, and that therefore slows it down. And as a consequence, you can't perform that investigation as often as you might like to.
So you have to cherry pick, I suppose, what you hope is the worst thing that you've seen.
Absolutely, you have to prioritize to higher impact cases or cases that look to be the most serious. But that's quite difficult to do without the proper root cause analysis. You will be leaving some behind that probably warrant a fuller investigation.
And what's the organizational impact of that? Not just necessarily on the inability to necessarily be exploring what you should explore, but the teams involved, the people.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a number of challenges within the Security Operations Center. So operationally, as we've kind of discussed, it is currently taking on average 26 days to perform an incident response investigation. So almost a month, which is obviously far too long. From a welfare perspective, the lack of integration in this process, this pivot from detection into investigation, is creating a lot of manual work. It's creating a lot of tedious tasks for the individuals working within the Security Operations Center. That reduces overall job satisfaction, which means that a high percentage of them are currently looking to change jobs. And that churn within the team is incredibly damaging and also very expensive. So we see a lot of welfare issues within the SOC, which automation of the process, the pivot into investigation, can be useful.
I want to talk too about the upsides of doing that, but also what about regulations? Surely that's a big driver.
Regulations is certainly for the cohort of enterprises that we're talking to, typically focused towards critical national infrastructure verticals. There is an incredibly complex regulatory environment globally that creates a lot of cost and a lot of complexity to the enterprise. So what we see across all major territories, whether that's in Europe with things like NIS2 and DORA compliance, GDPR even is creating some requirements there. In the US, we have state and federal requirements that are becoming harder and harder to comply with. Asia, same story. India just recently, just 2.5 weeks ago, released a new framework that requires breaches to be initially reported within 6 hours. So incredibly challenging to do that unless you have the right solutions in place to enable that. So yeah, regulatory compliance, certainly on a global level, is a huge driver.
So what would you highlight, aside from having to deal with this regulatory soup, if you will, or the challenges of the regulations that we're seeing today with fast reporting? What does the upside become then when you can address the fragmented approach that you've been detailing?
So we can speed the whole process up. That in itself drives resiliency within the organization. So at Binalyze, we reduced that average investigation time down from the 26 days that I mentioned before down to typically 4 hours. We're also collecting full forensic visibility on average in 7 to 10 minutes. So transformative in terms of how fast you can leverage digital forensics. And by transforming the nature of digital forensics in that way, we open up a number of new use cases as well. So the ability to schedule forensics, the ability to perform regular baseline forensic acquisitions, and then do some differential analysis against that to proactively threat hunt at the forensic level. But bringing the overall incident response case time down to hours instead of weeks, or in some cases months, is transformative in terms of building resilience into the organization.
Greater use of inside resources as well. You can upskill potentially?
We've certainly seen that with a number of our partners, where our technology, our platform, has enabled them to upskill their level 1, level 2 analysts to perform more investigative work, as opposed to just doing the alert monitoring and then escalating into level 3, level 4 analysts, very expensive resource. So pushing the capability of level 1, level 2 analysts up into investigation is definitely a positive outcome, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you're creating more repeatable processes, better, more rigorous, I would think, ways of doing things.
More rigorous, and we're also integrating as well with the rest of the security stack that's already there. So we mentioned right at the beginning that most large enterprises now have reached a level of comfort and maturity with things like CM, SOAR, EDR. At Binalyze, we can integrate with those platforms to automate the pivot into investigation and do that on a 24/7 basis. So another great outcome, transformative outcome within the SOC.
Well, fantastic. Anything that speeds incident response is a good thing.
100%. 100%.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I've been speaking with Steve Jackson of Binalyze. I'm Matthew Schwartz with ISMG. Thank you for joining us.